Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. There's still no end in sight to that procedural standoff that has grounded the House of Commons for 8 weeks now. The standoff triggered by a Conservative motion introduced in September, but the Conservative House Leader refuses to take blame for lost sitting days. Instead, he blames the Trudeau Liberals for refusing to hand over documents tied to a now defunct Green Fund. The Conservatives want the RCMP to review those documents for any criminal wrongdoing.
And let's remember what this scandal is all about. Liberal-friendly board members, people appointed to the board by Justin Trudeau, funneled tax dollars into their own companies. The Auditor General found $400 million worth of grants misappropriated in this way. Also found over 180 conflicts of interest. And the government has fought transparency on this all along the way.
Now, yesterday, the government House Leader did share that her government has already given 29,000 pages related to the fund to Parliament, but because many of those pages are redacted or withheld, Mr. Scheer says it amounts to nothing more than a stunt. For her reaction to this, we're now joined by the government House Leader Karina Gould. Minister, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mr. Scheer says your government is not being transparent about the Green Fund, that your lack of transparency points to Liberal misuse of public funds. What do you say to that?
Well, he's making it all up. He's just not telling the truth. The fact that he's even suggesting he knows what's in the document is a fabrication, because no member of Parliament has seen those documents, not because they're not allowed to, but because they didn't ask to see them. Those documents have been given to the law clerk, who has given them directly to the RCMP. So Mr. Scheer is just making things up. There's almost 29,000 pages worth of documents that have been given to the law clerk of the House of Commons that have been passed on to the RCMP. And, there are some redactions, but they're minimal, and they're to protect the privacy rights of Canadians and solicitor-client privilege. And, the fact that he would even suggest he has an idea of what's in them, to me, is ridiculous, because he hasn't seen them, he doesn't know, and the fact of the matter is that we provided as much information as possible to, that is required of us, but protected the part that protects the rights of Canadians, as a government is obliged to do, and protects police independence and the separation of powers in our country. So Mr. Scheer is making things up, and he's fabricating what he's saying.
Now, you say that the redactions are minimal, but it does allow him to say that there's a lack of transparency. So if, for example, this went to committee, would those be unredacted documents that could be reviewed by parliamentarians?
Well, Parliament hasn't asked for these documents for their use, and that's part of the problem, Michael, is that this is the first time in Canadian history that parliamentarians are asking for documents not for their use, but to be given straight to a police force, and in this case, the RCMP. That's what's so unprecedented, and that's what's so concerning about this. So as a government, we have an obligation to protect the rights of Canadians. We have an obligation to respect the independence of the police. The police have said that if they were to use any of these documents, it might compromise their investigation, because it's not the proper way to go about getting documents that could have information that could lead to a criminal investigation. And so obviously, if the RCMP were to ask the government for documents, they would do so in a way that follows proper judicial due process, and the government would comply, just as we did when the Auditor General asked for these documents, and there was complete transparency in that process. What Mr. Scheer is alleging and what he is stating is simply false. It is incorrect, and I think it's really irresponsible of him to do this. And basically, he's just trying to prop up the ridiculous partisan games that the Conservative members of Parliament are playing in the House of Commons, because the documents have been shared. The House of Commons is doing what they asked for with them, which is sharing them with the RCMP. We did that to protect Canadians' rights and to respect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But the Conservative members of Parliament continue to obstruct, they continue to filibuster, they continue to play games, and they're not doing it based on principle. They're not doing it based on anything that is meaningful right now. They're just doing it to advance their own partisan interests and to muck up the business of the House.
So when the Conservative House Leader says that your government has been unwilling to be transparent at every step of this process. What do you say to that?
That is completely and utterly false. You know, this whole thing arose because the Auditor General was doing an audit of this initiative, and of course the government complies entirely with the Auditor General, who is independent. And by the way, the Auditor General raised issues with the motion that the Conservatives put forward because she said it compromises her independence. The RCMP Commissioner raised those same issues when it comes to police independence, as well as the privacy rights and the charter rights of Canadians. So Mr. Scheer is simply stating things that are incorrect and that are false, and only because they want to muck up the work of the House. They want to hold back the important work that parliamentarians are supposed to be here doing for Canadians, and only for their own partisan interest, not because they want to do anything for Canadians, but only because they're in it for themselves.
Okay, so you know, how long will you let it last then? Because, you know, the Globe and Mail, their editorial board did note that the House has already lost, a fifth of its scheduled sitting days in 2024. More than half of the sitting days will be lost if this goes on until the end of the year. So how long will you let this go on for?
Well, look, privilege trumps all other business in the House of Commons. So, you know, privilege is not something that, you know, the average Canadian is thinking about. But when a member's privilege raises a question of privilege, they can debate this motion until it stops. So what the Conservatives have said is that they are just going to keep debating this motion kind of the whole time. And what they did is not only did they introduce their motion, but they amended it so that they could put up even more speakers, because members of Parliament can only speak to an issue one time, right? So they keep amending it so they can put up more speakers, because all they want to do is delay and stop the work of the House of Commons. We've provided the documents. 29,000 pages, almost 29,000 pages. We've done the right thing. We are standing up for the rights of Canadians. We are protecting democracy, and Conservatives are really just trying to make a mess of things. And, you know, for me, that's not what Canadians send us as parliamentarians to Ottawa to do. They expect that we would stand up for their rights. They expect that we take our jobs seriously. You know, today, Michael, I don't know if you watched Question Period, but the way Conservative members of Parliament acted were completely disgraceful. They made an absolute mockery of this place. And I'm sorry, but if you are asking Canadians for your trust and saying that they should have faith in you to govern this country, what I saw today is not fit for leadership. It was, they're trying to make a circus of this place. They do not respect the rules of this institution. They were pushing back against the Speaker's ruling, and I have never seen Conservative members of Parliament act in such a disgraceful and shameful way as I did today. But this is just par for the course with them under Pierre Poilievre's leadership. They have no respect for our institutions. They have no respect for our democracy. And if they don't respect the House of Commons and they don't respect these institutions, they certainly don't respect Canadians.
Okay, listen, I do want to talk about the Conservative MPs that were expelled from the House today for not withdrawing unparliamentary language. But, you know, you and I have talked before, and you said prorogation is not something that you're willing to pursue. But given the impasse, and this has been 8 weeks of this delay, this standoff, is it time to consider prorogation? Will you?
No, because we believe in getting through the work of the House and the important work of Parliament. It is Conservative members of Parliament who are making a mockery of this place. We are committed to delivering on the important legislation, the important programs, and the important policies for Canadians. You know, we understand that this is a really tough time for a lot of families and a lot of people across Canada, and we want to be able to deliver on the programs and the policies that are going to make a meaningful difference in their lives. Conservative members of Parliament do not want to do that. They are making a mockery of this place, and they are disrespecting Canadians. So I am here, Liberal members of Parliament are here to work for Canadians. We take our job seriously. I cannot say the same for Conservative members of Parliament who are demonstrating just how unserious they are, how disrespectful they are of Parliament, how disrespectful they are of Canadians, and instead of working together as Canadians expect for us to be able to deliver for them in meaningful ways that are going to make their lives better, all they do is, you know, make a complete joke of the House of Commons, and they hold up that important work, and they are not here in the best interests of Canadians. They're only here to serve themselves. Okay,
so 3 Conservative MPs were, again, kicked out of the House of Commons today for not withdrawing unparliamentary language. But, 2 of them were asking about your colleague Randy Boissonnault. Mr. Poilievre accusing him of claiming to be Indigenous in order to secure government contracts meant for the Indigenous community. Why should Mr. Boissonnault remain in Cabinet given the concerns being expressed?
Look, we have rules in Parliament about respectful language and how we treat each other. And the whole reason we have those rules is so that we can have respectful debate. And there's a reason why we ask our questions and we debate through the Speaker and not towards each other. Those Conservative members of Parliament didn't follow those rules, and that's why they were kicked out. And quite frankly, we can have heated discussions. We can have heated debate. That's part of Parliament. That's part of our democracy. But we can do so in a way that is respectful of each other and respectful of Canadians. When it comes to Mr. Boissonnault, he has addressed those questions, he has addressed those issues, and that is up to him to continue to discuss, because that is about him.
Minister Gould, thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you very much, Michael.